Does devil exist as entity and who he or she is? It's a bit of a weird question.
I like these questions. Well,
It's an
there's lots of,
interesting question.
first off, devil's a word, and lots of cultures use that term differently. So in some interpretations of this term, right, the devil is that dark part of you that wants you to be angry and aggressive and greedy and vengeful and fear-based, right? So we all have this part of our psyche that essentially creates limitation for us. And in many traditions, that's the interpretation of the word devil or Satan. It's our own inner demon. It's our own destructive nature in ourselves that makes our life harder, that makes our experiences more challenging, because those ideas are all about limitation, right? I'm not God. I can't do it. I'm not loving. I'm not peaceful. I'm not worthy. So in many cases, the devil, as it's written in these ancient books, is really just a symbol for a part of our own selves that works against our own happiness. In terms of a being like an overlord devil, no, I've never seen anything like that in my physical or non-physical travels. I've never come across any sort of great power of darkness, a being of darkness controlling mankind. There is no opposite to God in my experience. God is not in conflict with anything or any being. So there's not a war between God and the devil. I've never experienced anything like that. My experience is God is everything, and the energy creating everything is love. And we suffer because we don't realize that. We believe that the people we see are evil or bad or wrong, and then we generate these feelings of suffering inside our own emotions because we believe what we perceive is bad or wrong. If we quiet down the mind and we stop making these judgments, what we discover is this natural state of peace starts arising. And then once the peace expands to a certain level, we start noticing a feeling of oneness and love. If we stay with a quiet mind and we go beyond that part of ourselves that divides things into the beliefs of good and bad, we realize this oneness state. And that's this blissful happiness. So when I look at the religions of the world, I see lots of stories, right? And usually when we are identified with a religion and believing it to be our religion, how I believe or see things, we take it literally. So for example, if you were living in the country of Greece many thousands of years ago, you may have thought that the Greek gods are real. And there's a god in the ocean moving the waters, and there's a god on the mountaintop throwing down lightning, right? If you lived in the Roman times, you might believe that the Roman gods are real. If you lived in India in those ancient times, you might believe the Hindu gods are real. In the Western world, we're part of a Christian culture, and some Christians believe in the stories as reality. And later on, when we look back, if we're not identified with those cultures, we oftentimes find them to just be stories that helped us to understand the human experience. So myself, I have a degree in religious studies, and I've studied many of the religions of the world. And what I realize is they all have their stories that are explained to human beings about our own experience. So we have stories with legends and mythical characters that exemplify, that demonstrate different qualities of human emotion. So we have gods essentially that show us examples of what it means to be human. There's stories, there are characters, there's legends. We see this also in Greek and Roman myths. Sometimes we have gods that represent forces in nature, and the stories about those gods help us understand nature, how the oceans move, how the clouds move, the different energies of the planet, stories about Apollo and the sun god. And if you read these stories, trying to understand it's actually a school of knowledge being passed on to mankind, then you can realize that there's a relativity between the ancient stories and modern day understanding. Right? So oftentimes you would say, Apollo, the god of the sun, it's the healing energy. And if you, submit yourself to worship, Apollo, then you will be healed of all your illnesses. Well, we look at the physical sun and we realize that the energy of the sun heals everything. The energy of the sun is the life force energy for a human body. So if we look at this story of this God, we realize it's not a separate person. It's actually a story that helps us understand the qualities of what it's referencing. I see that that's true for the Indian gods of the Indian country, Hindu gods. I see that's true of many of the Christian stories. So when I look at Satan or the devil, I see it's a representation of those dark parts of ourselves that make us feel limited and separate and alone.